rock. But now we're going to be talking about an organisation called SARC, which is Sexual Assault Referral Centre, with Chris. Good morning, Chris.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for inviting me in.
That's fine. Right, now, you deal with rape.
Yeah, we deal with all types of sexual violence, so it's a difficult subject, but we cover rape, sexual grooming, exploitation, child sexual abuse. So we provide a support service for anybody of any age, really, who's been affected either directly or indirectly by what is some very, very difficult times.
And of course, it's a horrific crime, but it isn't readily reported enough, is it?
No, there's a real problem, which is obviously one of the reasons why I'm here, because we want people to come forward and get help. The statistics are difficult to work out, but it looks like 1 in 4 women in a lifetime, women and girls, are seriously sexually assaulted, and 1 in 6 men and boys. If you take that and average as 1 in 5 of the population, you're talking a fifth of the population is subject to a serious sexual assault, either as a child or through adulthood, and only 20% of those people actually get help. 80% don't tell anybody, they suffer in silence, and the problems that come from trying to stand alone against that are quite difficult to overcome.
That's it, because when a person is sexually abused or raped, it leads to long-term problems like depression, even to the effect where they commit suicide.
Yeah, the impact's tremendous, and it's a roller coaster when you're being subject to a sexual assault of any type. There are some people who manage on their own, and they go through life. It doesn't go away, it's always there, but they cope well. And for those people, that's the right thing, because what we're about is doing what's the right thing for the right person at the right time. For others, the results can be horrendous.
Yeah.
And those issues around not being able to form proper relationships, being worried about having children yourself, not being able to function correctly sexually, to depression, mental illness. But there's a physical side that comes from that as well. There's risks of sexually transmitted infections, unwanted pregnancy, and a whole host of things that we work with other people, of course, because we're a team here on Teesside, to help sort those problems out if we can.
Now, do you think the fact is that if somebody gets raped and they try to cope alone, but they can't, then where is the best place to come to first to report the crime?
Well, you don't actually have to report a crime to get help, and I think that is probably one of the strongest messages I want to get across. I think the instinct has been in the past to think, oh my God, I've been raped. I can either go to the police, and Cleveland Police are brilliant in this, one of the best in the country, in my view, is looking after rape victims. But going to the police isn't right for lots of people. So there's always been this thought of, I either go to the police or I do nothing. Well, you don't have to do nothing, and we're a referral centre, so what we do is we deal with anybody who wants to contact us, and there's lots of ways you can do that, and I'll talk about those as we go. But the main thing is knowing that there's somewhere you can come to 24/7, we'll understand, we'll listen to you, we'll believe you, and if you want to call the police later, we'll be with you and we'll support you in doing that and reporting the crime.
Yeah, it's all about support, isn't it? And finding out the information that people need to know about this horrific crime.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, and it's about empowering people. If you've been sexually assaulted, and I'm sure that some of the people out there listening to this are thinking, I'm talking about them. Well, I am. You know, if you're out there and it's happened to you, we know that it's difficult. And we know that your power was taken away when you were sexually assaulted. To do it, whether it's done by grooming, con tricks, bullying children, bullying elderly people, or whether it's the rare but frightening stranger rape, held at knife point type of thing, and physically held down and raped, whether it's any of those things, your power was taken away. So we don't tell you what to do.
Right.
We talk about what you could do and what you'd like to do, and within your time frame.
And of course, the horrific thing about rape is the fact that, as you said, Chris, it seems like your power is taken away from you, and the fact that you become vulnerable, you feel sort of dirty in a way, the fact that you've allowed it to happen to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of self-blame can go on with this, but that really comes from society. The idea that somehow it's the victim's fault. And one of the things that I'm very keen on is to work through the fact that how can it ever be the victim's fault? The perpetrator, the person who does it to them, decides what they're going to do. Nobody else. There's nothing in this country, no offence, the most horrendous crime isn't punishable by rape, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So how can anybody be responsible? And we hear things, oh, she went out, she was wearing a short skirt, she was dressed sexually, she was asking for it, it's her fault. How can it be? Is the punishment for looking attractive being raped?
Exactly.
Of course, it's shocking, isn't it, when you think of the attitude?
It is when you look at the statistics as well, and the statistics are absolutely shocking. But the fact is that, as I said before, this type of crime isn't reported, and it should be, because people should come forward. They should say to the police or to yourselves, "I've been raped. What can I do?"
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's important though that somebody who's been a victim of crime, and we'll use rape as an example because it's the one that stands in everyone's mind and is probably feared the most. They're not responsible for protecting society. It's society who should have protected them. So what we'll say is, yes, if coming forward to the police and going through a court case is for you, that's the right thing to do. And we work with loads of agencies, and I know the radio station's spoken with Eva Women's Aid, for example. We refer to other agencies to provide support as well. We don't just do it all on our own. It's about a team effort. And organisations like Eva, Arch North East, and others, they supply something called an ISVA, Independent Sexual Violence Advisor. Now it's a gobful, that, isn't it? but what it effectively means is somebody who will stay with you and support you through a full police inquiry from start to finish, from just wondering whether you should come forward and whether you want to talk to the bobbies about what's going on, to reporting it to the police, to the waiting and wondering what's going to happen as the file goes to the Crown Prosecution Service for decision, to just having someone to talk to and help you through the basics during that time, to then giving you a pre-court visit, going and look around the courtroom, to helping to arrange ways in which you can give your evidence, because you don't have to give your evidence directly in the court these days. You can apply for special measures so people don't have to confront the offender. To then the support afterwards, regardless of whether there's a conviction or not. So, and that's available to anybody.
Yeah.
And we work with Bernardo's who supply those for children, because that's a very specialist area.
Yeah.
Right the way through to adults.
Do you think that the reason that this crime isn't reported enough, and again, I do apologise if I go on about reporting, but it is essential that people come forward about this, is the fact that they're stigmatised, the fact, as you said before, oh, well, it was your fault, you were the one to blame.
I think as a nation, we're really, really poor at talking about sex. I mean, everyone's listening out there. They're a result of some kind of sexual activity, aren't they?
Exactly, yeah.
And it's one of the most natural things, can be one of the most pleasurable, one of the most important things about being a human being. So isn't it something we should celebrate and not treat like a Brian Ricks farce, or talk about as conquests or in hushed terms?
Yeah.
And by not talking about sex, and I don't mean reproduction, I mean sex, we actually make it easy for offenders to offend because they know that people are uncomfortable talking about sex.
Yeah.
And I think that if you look at countries like in Scandinavia, I mean, they still have a large amount of sexual abuse, but it's easier to talk about. It's more open, and I think as a society, I think we need to start grasping the nettle and saying, well, look, this is, we eat, we drink, we go to the loo, we have sex, don't we?
Yeah.
It's part of what we are. We're human beings. We're an animal with a good thinking brain.
Do you think, because I'm from London, right, and the fact is I get this thought that when a man goes out with his friends on a Saturday night, has 15 pints, and then they say, oh, you know, I've laid like 20 women this week, and then when a woman like does it, you know, she's considered as a bit of a well, let's put it bluntly, a slag, you know. I mean, it's this sort of perception that really has to be drawn out of people's minds in the Northeast, especially because it's the wrong perception about women.
Yeah, well, I think it's a wrong perception about men.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you know, if you and me sat having a pint and talking about how we're going to be going shagging tonight and using these sort of derogatory terms, and, you know, and the truth is that most of what men talk about is absolute bull. It's all bravado, and it encourages a way of treating women which is totally disrespectful. I mean, do you really want to be going out and having sex with a woman who's semi-conscious through drink? You know, if I see someone who's in a vulnerable position, a true man looks after them.
Absolutely.
Protects them. He doesn't go trying to have sex with them because they can't say no.
Yeah.
So if you actually spoke to most blokes on a one-to-one and said, I'll tell you what, you know, if you saw a vulnerable woman, you'd just rape her, wouldn't you? And there'd be, of course not, but then it's the big laugh, isn't it? Now, I mean, I was out for our Christmas do last year, and I saw a group of lads, and as this girl got more and more drunk, they were targeting her. They were going across. They had no confidence in chatting anybody up until she was drunk. And then she looked like an easy target. As it was, some big bloke went over and told them to sling the hook. Because, you know, we've got to stand up and look after each other, haven't we?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's the fact that, you know, in the society that we live in, we've got to look after each other. That's the bottom line. And the fact that, again, I go on the male sort of perspective that, you know, they should treat women with respect to the point where, you know, this crime becomes less and less. But will that happen? Especially on a Saturday night when people go out and get drunk.
Well, it will do if blokes choose to change.
Yeah.
You know, if we want to go for this pseudo-image about being a hard man and going round having sex with people who are vulnerable, well, we won't get anywhere.
No.
And I think, you know, the feminist movement, rape crisis, and that, has done a lot to drive this agenda forward. But they need to hand the baton on now, and it needs to be blokes like you and me who aren't prepared to stand for it. You know, why should we, our whole idea be to go out on a night and have sex with someone who's drunk? Now, if you meet a girl and you think she's sexy and she has been giving you the right signals, but she ends up having too many shots and can't make a proper decision, is truly legless. If she wants to have sex with you, she'll have sex with you on a day when she's sober.
Right.
And if you need to get tanked up because you've got no confidence, you need to have a look at how you're behaving yourself.
Absolutely.
So make the right decision. Look after her. Make sure she's home safe. Tomorrow, you ring up. How you doing? Did you get home safely? Had a bit too much to drink? If she likes you, you can have a proper sex life when you're sober.
Yeah.
And both people can enjoy it in respect.
I think the thing is, Chris, it's all about changing perceptions and attitudes about sex. I mean, sex can be a wonderful thing, but it's got to be consensual.
Yeah. I mean, and consent is an issue, really, that is fairly straightforward. It can't be forced in any way. But consent is complicated as well, in the sense that if you feel that you've got a right to sex, I don't know, you might have been married 20 years, and you think, oh, it's my right to have sex with our lass whenever I want. Well, the truth is you can't. Now, if your wife's frightened to say no because of the constant hassle we'll get, we get cases where there's women in relationships, in domestic violence relationships, who say yes to sex whenever because they know that there'll be no housekeeping money. They know that they'll be shouted at. They know that the dog will get kicked across the room. They know that the kids will be shouted at and it'll be a misery. Laying back and thinking of England is probably rape.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is that, women are drawn into that sort of secular decision because of the pressure of the husband or the boyfriend. It's sort of like keeping the kids, okay, keeping the household okay. It's those type of pressures.
Yeah, and I think we're going through a change in society. I mean, look up until the Sexual Offences Act as it stands now was introduced, came into effect in 96, around about 96. Up until then, the rape definition was unlawful sexual intercourse, was the term it used. Now, unlawful sexual intercourse in that sense meant outside of marriage. So up until then, a man could not be found guilty of raping his wife.
Right.
So, as a society, we actually wrote into our legislation that it was almost a man's right to have sex with his wife.
Yeah.
And of course things changed around that time and legislation freed up. I mean, homosexuality was largely illegal. Anal sex was largely illegal. And those things have changed. But also has the right not to be treated as a sex object. But the same applies for men as well. I mean, men are subject to one hell of a lot of sexual abuse, and it's even harder for us to come forward and talk about it.
Right.
It's an even bigger taboo. And a lot of sexual assault on men is around power. It's around abuse and bullying. So you get anal penetration with objects, stuff like that. You get difficult subject, but forced buggery, anal sex. And it's not done out of a driver for sexual gratification at all. It's done out of sheer bullying, degradation and cruelty.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of thing that you sometimes see in the prisons. You see it in military settings, initiation ceremonies in groups and things like that. And it's a difficult area. But as blokes, we're even harder to reach than the girls.
Yeah. Now, Chris, what does your Helen House, Helen Britton House, what do they offer? What do they do?
Well, we really provide a one-stop service for anybody who's been a victim of any kind of sexual offence, including grooming, rape, and all of those. And we cater for every single age group. So we go from any age. I mean, just as a guide, that last year, our youngest client we had through the door was sadly 2-year-old, and sadly 92 at the other stage. So everybody is vulnerable to this, and we provide a service for people who are upset by it, concerned about it, and in crisis. And it doesn't have to have occurred yesterday or today. It could have occurred 30 years ago or 3 minutes ago. So we're open to everybody. And we offer a full set of services. And I think it's worth knowing that we work very, very closely with Cleveland Police. So if you report a rape or any kind of sexual crime, they're going to work with us to give you that support. So you're not going to be on your own if you ring 101 or 999 and speak to Cleveland Police. They're our partners, if you like, when it comes to cases that have been reported. So typically, if you've reported a fairly recent rape, there might be forensic opportunities around that.
Yeah.
So DNA plays a large part in proving sexual contact between people. And DNA is obviously present in semen, blood, saliva, skin contact. So in trying to prove that actually, in the police trying to prove that a sexual offence took place, they have to prove all sorts about intent and people's mindsets around that. But also they need to prove that a sexual act took place. And a lot of sex offenders are quite clearly lying, scheming, cruel, horrible people who will lie through their teeth. So it's important to get that evidence, and we're a main part of getting that evidence through forensic examination. Now, this is a difficult and intrusive process. We use specially trained doctors and nurses through a company called Tasco. They're experts in this. We have medical rooms, and our crisis workers will stay with and support a victim of a crime all the way through a sexual examination. Now, if you're a woman in your mid-20s up over, you've probably had a smear test. And I'm sure that all those envelopes land on their doorstep and everyone goes, ugh,
yeah,
it's time for one of those again. And if you've had that, or you've had a baby, you've probably had some kind of vaginal investigation done, and it's not dissimilar to that.
Right.
So typically there'll be swabs taken, and there's a medical checkup done of you as well. And there's some time windows when you can get evidence and you can't. And no matter what's happened to you sexually, the doctor would talk to you about what had happened. And so we would only be examining the bits that were relevant. And you're fully supported. It's not nice.
No.
You know, how can that ever be? But we make a horrible thing as good as it can be. We've got full showering facilities, changing of clothes, tea, coffee, biscuits, crisps and stuff. We look after people. Because, you know, you might have been raped after a night out, you might be drunk, you're all over the place, you don't know what the hell's happening, and we're your friends and all that.
Yeah. Do you find that with the onset of modern technology that crimes of rape are being solved more now than, let's say, 5 years ago?
I don't know is the true answer, because it's difficult to know quite what the attrition rate is, and with such underreporting. What you've seen is a difference in the areas where cases are contested at court. So typically, before DNA came about, it was harder to prove sexual contact. So your typical rapist would just say, nah, never touched her, didn't happen, she's lying. And that was the majority of cases. When DNA came about, and people realised that they were going to be stuck, and we would prove it, the royal we being the police and everyone who was on the side of good, we saw change. And that cynical change is that those same offenders, or that same type of person, went from saying it never happened to it did happen, but she consented.
Right.
So that wasn't a change in the way offences went, or victims was, that was a change in the lie that people told. And the vast majority of people who come forward reporting the rapes are telling the truth.
Do you think as well that people coming through your doors at Helen House are younger now?
No.
No.
I don't think there's any change in the profile. I mean, I think there's different vulnerabilities at different ages. We know, sadly, that hundreds and hundreds of children on Teesside are being sexually assaulted on a regular basis, quite often by their family members, people they know. You're more likely to be raped by a close family member than you are a stranger.
Right.
That is the truth. If you're going to be sexually assaulted, you're generally going to be by someone you know. Now, this is difficult in a family, isn't it? Because you have to think the unthinkable. Is my husband sexually assaulting my son or daughter?
Oh.
And they could well be. So I think there has to be some tough decisions made in families to talk about these things. Because it's a bit bloody late to talk about it after it's happened, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And we need to be frank about it. And let's face it, if you're asking your child, is everything all right? Was everything all right? Relationship all right with your mum? Anything happened that you're not happy with? If you talk about it in those terms, it makes it much harder for someone to offend, and it keeps them safer in the first place.
I think the fact is that, you know, this subject can be easily swept under the carpet, and it's these, as you said, Chris, these tough decisions that have to be made and the questions that have to be asked to bring these perpetrators to justice.
Yeah, well, if we take this 1 in 5 figure of the population in a lifetime subject to a sexual assault, and you start trying to work out how many offenders that is, well, I don't know, what's the population of the area we work in Teesside? Round about 600, 700,000 people. I mean, you're talking about in a lifetime then round about 120, 130,000 victims on Teesside in a lifetime. So, you know, there's people listening out there who sadly have been victims either last night, last week, last year, last decade.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can help them by a quick phone call.
And of course, I mean, this subject is very relevant today, especially with the headlines recently of various people who have done this in the past, let's say 30 years ago. Not going to name any names, but it is relevant.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the celebrity sex offender, for example, they're people in a position of power and in a position where their status meant that they would be believed over the little person. And it goes back to that re-empowering victims. Well, some of those celebrities went to the grave without being brought justice. Others are now languish in prison, and I hope they rot in hell, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Because they took a position of power and abused it. But that position of power doesn't have to be a celebrity. That position of power can be your boss at work.
Yeah.
It can be your partner. It can be, sadly, your dad. It can be anyone, and that power over people results in sexual abuse. Right,
now let's talk about contacts. If they want to contact you.
Yeah, well, we have a 24/7 telephone line, 01642 516 888. That number's the best way to get help. If you're suffering from anything about this now, Louise and Donna are there. You can pick up the phone now and you can ring that number. They'll answer it, have a chat with them. They'll give you some options about what you can do. On a night time, that number diverts to one of our mobile phones. Sometimes you might ring that on a night, you might end up with me. Who knows? Or you might end up with someone better, hopefully.
Oh.
I'm joking. But you can ring that number. We have crisis workers on that all day, every day.
So it's a 24/7 number?
It's a 24/7 number. If you need our help, we can meet you at our place at Helen House. If you want to report to the police, we can help you do that. If you're in need of support, we can give you telephone support. We can make an appointment to see you at a later time. And we can deal with what fits with you.
Yeah.
And that's what we're about. Our service is tailored around the person who needs our help.
And if things are really bad, do you actually do home visits?
We don't go out directly initially to do home visits.
Right.
There are risks around doing home visits, because if the perpetrator is around still, it's not a risk to us, but it can cause risks to the victim, particularly in domestic violence or domestic abuse relationships. So quite often they're better off coming to us. You come to us, it's not busy, you walk through the door, it feels like there's nobody there, and it's done like that. There isn't some great waiting area where you're sat with everybody else. It's not like that.
Yeah.
It's very discreet. We're at North Ormsby Health Village. It's a dead modern building. There's loads of other medically places around there, and our place doesn't have a big sign on saying Sexual Assault Referral Centre. It's got a little Helen House sticker on the door. So you come in there anonymously, and we provide a service for you in that way.
So it's very informal. I mean, there's nothing that's rigid or regimental. You just go in and you talk.
Yeah, we talk and we help. Now, if you've been a victim of a sexual crime fairly recently, there's some things you might be very worried about. You might be worried about being pregnant. Our doctors have morning after pills, different types depending on where you are. We have pregnancy testing kits. I mean, God forbid you might be trying for a baby with your partner. You go on a night out, get raped by somebody else. You wouldn't want us to give you a morning after pill and risk aborting the baby that you might already be pregnant with your husband, say. So what we could do is we could do a pregnancy test on you and say, oh, it only happened a couple of hours ago, you're pregnant now, so you won't be pregnant today. They're important thoughts, because later on you're thinking, oh, well, whose is the baby? And we understand about those thoughts. We have a range of drugs which fight HIV. So if we'd do a bit of a risk assessment. HIV is not prevalent on Teesside, only in with certain types of community, certain people. So, for example, if you were raped by a white Teesside man, the truth is that the risks of HIV is slim. Still a risk, but slim. If it's someone who's, I don't know, visiting from a country where in West Africa where AIDS is prevalent, we'd be much more concerned. But we've got the drugs there to give that and fight that, and we can stop that happening. We work very closely with sexual health on Teesside. So we do screenings and arrange screenings for chlamydia, gonorrhea, all those sort of things. So no matter what your worry, we'll find a way to try and address it.
And of course, you have a Twitter account at SARC Teesside,
yeah,
and Facebook as well.
Yeah, I run a bit of Facebook. It's a good way to get a quick snapshot of our information on Facebook. We don't take Facebook messaging because you can't get enough detail. Right. The best way to contact is on the phone, or you can walk in. Yeah. If you want to walk in. And I think that the Twitter account tends to be when I get on my high horse, really, about wanting to combat an issue, or somebody who's said something ridiculous in the media and I want to have a go at them, really. We also have a website, www.sarcteesside.co.uk, and that gives you really a lot of detail about the options and what you can achieve and what you can't achieve, really.
And of course, the fact is that all the information that you've heard today will be on our website, which is www.ignitionradio.co.uk. Chris, we could carry on talking about this for ages. We really could. And it's an important subject. If you're raped, come forward, get the help you need.
Yeah, don't suffer in silence. Give us a call.
Well, Chris, thank you very much for coming to Ignition today, this morning, and talking about a very serious subject. And as I say, if you want to know more, then, of course, all the information is on the social networks as well. Chris, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Cheers.